Let's talk about the order of operations and some basic exponent rules. Let's start with the exponents. For instance, we have 2 to the third power, or we could say cubed. The 2 is the whole number. That is the base. This little 3 here is the exponent, which is not a whole number. Now, the exponent tells us how many times to multiply the base. For instance, I'm going to multiply the number 2 3 times because it has an exponent of 3. Now, to get the final answer, I actually have to do the multiplication, which would be 4 times 2 is 8. So 2 cubed is 8. Let's look at a couple more things. If I had 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, how could I write this in a shorter abbreviation? I can do that by using exponents. Well, I have the base number 5, and I multiplied that number 4 times. So my base is 5 and my exponent is 4. What if I had negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3? Well, here the base is negative 3, and again I'm multiplying that number 4 times. Notice the parentheses, okay? It's important. We have another exponent that you don't typically ever see us write, and that is the first power. We don't typically write it because 7 to the first power is just 7. So it's like invisible. It's kind of understood that there's only one 7. Let's look at a couple examples. I want to emphasize why those parentheses are important. Let's look at negative 3 squared versus negative 3 in parentheses squared. The first one, negative 3 squared without parentheses, you're actually only squaring the 3. So you write the 3 2 times, and the negative just gets brought down. So 3 times 3 is 9. Bring down the negative sign, and you get negative 9. Over here, where negative 3 is in parentheses being squared, that means I'm squaring everything inside. So that means negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. Notice these answers are opposite, so you need to pay close attention to whether there's parentheses or not when you're raising something to an exponent. Let's look at another example. What about negative 5 squared without parentheses and then negative 5 in parentheses squared? Again, you're only squaring the 5. The negative is just tagging along. So the first one you get negative 25. The second one, since there's parentheses, you're squaring everything inside, which would be negative 5 times negative 5 is a positive 25. Now let's take a look at some orders of operations. Now many people learn about the order of operations by saying PEMDAS or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And although these are good ways to remember the order of operations, they do not emphasize one very important thing. And now let's talk about that. Now parentheses could be more than just parentheses. They're grouping symbols. Now grouping symbols could be any of the following. It could be parentheses, it could be brackets, it could be braces, and it also could be absolute value symbols. All of these are considered grouping symbols, which would be first in the order of operations. The E stands for exponents. So that means after you do all possible grouping symbols, you move on to exponents. So that's anything raised to a power. Now here's where it gets a little, not tricky, but where you got to make sure you're paying close attention to what you're doing. Now multiplication and division. A lot of people think that multiplication always comes before division, but that's just not true. You have to read it like a textbook. When you're reading the problem from left to right, which one comes first? Is it multiplication or is it division? For instance, let's just say 16 divided by 4 times 3. A lot of people would skip over the division and jump to 4 times 3. You would get the problem wrong. From left to right, 16 divided by 4 times 3. The division comes first. So it's 16 divided by 4 is 4, and then you do the times 3, which gives you 12. It has to do with which one comes first, from left to right. The same thing applies for addition and subtraction. Which one comes first, from left to right? Let's look at some examples. Let's look at 2 times 3 squared. Well, here, there are no grouping symbols. There's an exponent. So I have a positive 3 squared. So 3 times 3 is going to give me 9. And then I'm going to bring down the times 2. So my final answer is 18. What about this one? Let's do 100 divided by negative 4 minus 6 times negative 2 times 3. Now I know this looks funny, but this whole thing is multiplication. But again, from left to right, which one comes first? 100 divided by negative 4 comes before 6 times negative 2 times 3. So 100 divided by negative 4, let's think about the signs first. I have a positive divided by negative, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And 100 divided by 4 gives me 25. Then I'm going to bring everything else down. Now this again is all multiplication. So what is negative 6 times negative 2? It's a positive 12 times 3. So bring down the negative 25. Again, 12 times 3 is positive 36. So I have negative 25 plus 36. Here I have a negative and a positive. So I'm not going to add them, I'm going to subtract them. It's like having 25 bad guys and 36 good guys. How many people are going to make it out? So it looks like I'm going to have 11 good guys left. Let's try a few more. What about 100 divided by 2 times 5 minus 12 plus 4. Let's try this one. Let's see what we have. We have 100 divided by 2 times 5 minus 12 plus 4. From left to right, division comes before multiplication. 100 divided by 2 gives me 50. Bring down everything else. And then you do the multiplication. 50 times 5 gives me 250. Minus 12 plus 4. Now here, I could do 250 minus 12, or I could do 250 and 4 because they're both positive and get 254, and then just subtract the 12 last. And since the biggest number is positive, my answer is going to be positive. Let's look at a couple more. We have negative 4 brackets, negative 2 minus 3, 4 minus 8 squared, minus 2. So here we have not only brackets, but parentheses inside. So in this case, you want to make sure you go to the innermost set first, which is the 4 minus 8 squared. And inside of these parentheses, what are you going to do first? Well, I can't do anything with the 4, but I have this negative 8 squared. Now this is where you have to pay attention. Negative 8 is not in parentheses. So I'm only squaring the 8 and I'm going to bring down the minus sign. So I'm going to rewrite the entire problem except for the part that I'm doing. So this is going to be 8 times 8 is 64 and then bring down the minus sign. Notice I still have all my brackets and all my parentheses. Again, back here, 4 minus 64 is going to give me what number do you think? Since they're opposite, what am I going to do? Subtract. Now notice 3 in this parentheses, there's not a space in here. There's no plus or minus sign. So it's -3 times whatever answer you get here. So 4 minus 64 is -60. Close the brackets. So again, inside the brackets, I have -2 minus 3 times -64. So I'm going to do times. I'm going to rewrite everything. Bring down the -2. Now over here on the side, 64 times 3. I got 3 times 4 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18 plus that 1, 19. So 192. So a -3 times a -64 is a positive 192. Inside the bracket still, I have -2 plus 190, opposite sign. So I'm going to subtract and get a positive 190 minus the 2. And again, this is -4 times 190 minus 2. So I'm going to do the times first. Over on the side, 190 times 4 is 0. 4 times 9 is 36. Carry the 3. 4, 5, 6, 7. 760. Negative times a positive. So this is a -760 minus 2, which is going to give me a -762. Let's just try one more. What about this one? Now in this problem, it looks like a fraction. So don't make yourself crazy. Just do the top first, then do the bottom, and then don't forget to simplify. So we have at the top, -3 times parentheses 3 plus 2 plus 5. So I'm going to do the parentheses first. 3 plus 2 is 5, so let's just rewrite the top. So now I have -3 times 5 plus 5. -3 times 5 is -15 plus 5. This is going to equal -10. So that's the answer for the top. Now let's look at the bottom. I have 8 minus 3 times a -4. We're going to do the times first. -3 times -4 is a positive 12. Bring down the 8. 8 plus 12 is 20. So this is the answer for the bottom. So my answer is -10 over 20. But I'm not finished because -10 over 20 can be simplified. What number goes into 10 and 20 evenly? That would be 10. So my final answer is -1 over 2. And one more. Let's try 10 absolute value 2 minus 5 absolute value. -2 to the 5th power, not in parentheses. So here my grouping symbol is the absolute value. So let's see what we get. What's 2 minus 5? That's going to be -3. So now it's 10 times the absolute value of -3 minus 2 to the 5th power. Now you need to ask yourself, what is the absolute value of -3? Since absolute value basically is always positive, you bring down the 3. So now, instead of 10 times the absolute value of -3, it's just going to be 10 times 3, which is 30. And now we have the -2 to the 5th power. Now it's not -2 to the 5th power, it's just 2 to the 5th power. So we have this negative sign, and then we have 5 2's. So 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Bring down the 2. 4 times 4 is 16. Times 2 is 32. And then don't forget about your negative sign. So now I have 30 minus 32. Different signs. Subtract. Take the sign of the biggest number. I get -2.